case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her coworkers grew worried and attempted to contact her, but her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightened their anxiety. Her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Raphael to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lola's provided the financial backing while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Raphael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Raphael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Raphael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Raphael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for her shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Raphael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Raphael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development. Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted toenails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and identified it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother came to New York to identify the human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. The evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Douglas Benfield was born on October 2, 1961, in Palo Alto, California. He was the second child of John and his wife, Suzanne, who had 3 children in total: Wesley, Douglas, and David. Suzanne, a teacher, and John, an aerospace engineer, upheld values of discipline and hard work in their home. John's career later took the family to Huntsville, Alabama, a city known for its role in advanced aerospace development. Douglas thrived in this environment, displaying curiosity and enthusiasm. He was especially close to his brother David, and together they often attended church camps organized by their mother, who was actively involved in the religious community. As Douglas entered high school, he joined the wrestling team, which allowed him to channel his dedication and passion. He quickly became one of the school's top wrestlers, inspiring his younger brother David, who would later follow in his footsteps. David often recalled how Douglas supported and encouraged him during his first match, a memory he cherished deeply. Around this time, however, the family faced a tragic loss when John passed away. This hardship led Suzanne to return to her native Texas with her children, seeking support from family as they coped with their grief. After graduating from high school, Douglas pursued a biology degree at a local university. Those close to him remember this period fondly, as he not only excelled academically, but also co-founded a fraternity, demonstrating leadership and teamwork. During his college years, Douglas also discovered a passion for art, an interest that led him to create murals and design logos, distinguishing himself in various academic projects. Despite these new interests, he remained dedicated to wrestling, eventually ranking among the top 10 wrestlers in the state. After completing his degree, Douglas enlisted in the Navy, initially serving as a navigator and co-pilot on aircraft carriers. He continued his training at flight school, where he earned the rank of Naval Flight Officer. In the early 1990s, Douglas met someone special, leading to a whirlwind romance and marriage. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in divorce as quickly as it began. Douglas refocused on his career, enrolling in intelligence training and joining the Naval Intelligence Division. After achieving the rank of lieutenant commander, he retired from the Navy, ending a distinguished military career. Seeking a new direction, he moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where he opened a restaurant. His military background also allowed him to work as a consultant for security and communications technology firms, securing government contracts. During this time, he met a single mother of two, and the two married in 1999, creating a blended family. However, despite appearances, their relationship was sometimes tumultuous, with reports of conflict, including physical altercations that they chose not to report. Nevertheless, life went on, and in 2001, they welcomed a daughter, Eva. Shortly after Eva's birth, Douglas underwent a vasectomy. The following years appeared stable as Douglas managed several tech businesses working with both private clients and government projects. Eventually, he became involved in national security initiatives focusing on strategic policy development. As Douglas's professional obligations increased, he was frequently away from home, which strained his relationship with his wife to the point where they began sleeping in separate rooms. In December 2015, Eva returned home from school one day to find the front door locked and no response from her mother. Worried, she crawled through the bushes to a window. With the help of a neighbor who forced the door open, they discovered her mother's lifeless body. The emergency services were called and her remains were taken to the morgue, where an autopsy later revealed that the woman had passed away from an undiagnosed heart condition. This unexpected loss deeply affected the family, and Douglas found solace in faith. He began attending church regularly and started each day by reading Bible verses, sharing them with his daughter. By 2016, he had established connections in political circles, particularly with prominent donors of the Republican presidential campaign. During a summer fundraiser in Florida, he met Ashley Burns, a striking young woman born in Texas in 1991 to Alicia and Raymond Burns. Ashley had been immersed in ballet from a young age, working with renowned instructors and joining prestigious ballet companies. However, at 23, a leg injury forced her to retire from professional ballet, setting her on a new path. Ashley subsequently began teaching dance classes to children and maintained costumes for student workshops. She also explored modeling, primarily in swimwear and lingerie photography, though her success was limited. On a personal note, Ashley had been through a divorce after a 2-year marriage and remained close to her mother. She was a dedicated Republican, and after attending a political event, met then presidential candidate Donald Trump. This encounter led her to join his campaign office in Florida, where she met Douglas at a fundraising dinner. Her beauty, paired with her elegance as a former ballerina, immediately caught his attention. Despite their significant age difference, Douglas was 54 and she was 24. They connected effortlessly that evening. Later, Douglas texted her, expressing gratitude for the time they shared. 2 days later, when Douglas flew to Israel for business, he and Ashley maintained a steady flow of text messages resembling two teenagers in love. As they got to know each other better through these exchanges, they discovered shared interests from a deep religious faith to similar music tastes. Both also shared a notable enthusiasm for collecting firearms. Upon Douglas's return to the U.S., they had already decided to marry, opting to keep their plans private, even from Douglas's daughter, Eva. On September 6, 2016, they married in a small private ceremony in Charleston, with only a close friend of Douglas's as a witness. Ashley then moved into Douglas's home. Their early days of marriage faced an unexpected complication when Eva's friend, Sydney, moved in due to issues at home. Douglas and Ashley handled this situation with composure, eventually becoming Sydney's legal guardians. Despite her efforts, Ashley struggled to connect with Eva, who was still grieving her mother's death. It didn't help that Eva had been unaware of her father's plans to remarry. Ashley made numerous attempts to bond by sharing activities, like watching ballet videos and working on gardening projects, but she couldn't shake her insecurity and jealousy, sensing that Douglas would always prioritize his daughter over her. In early 2017, the couple decided to pursue a shared dream by launching a ballet company in Charleston. They sought to challenge traditional ballet norms by recruiting dancers from diverse backgrounds, creating an inclusive space for talent. At the same time, Ashley persuaded Douglas to undergo a vasectomy reversal so they could have a child together. This succeeded, and in July of that year, they learned they were expecting. However, the news intensified tensions between Ashley and Eva, especially when Ashley found Eva's diary, revealing the girl's deep resentment toward her. The diary discovery ignited a series of arguments between Douglas and Ashley that grew increasingly frequent and intense. During one confrontation, Douglas punched a wall, later even lashing out at the family pets. In another heated moment, he threw a gun toward Ashley, leaving a hole in the wall. He then raised the weapon to his own head, threatening to end his life, only to discharge it toward the ceiling moments later. Astonishingly, a few days after this explosive incident, they held a party at a hotel to formally announce their marriage to friends. In August, Ashley experienced significant discomfort related to her pregnancy. After discussing it with Douglas, they agreed she would rest at her mother's house in Florida while he stayed back to organize ballet company logistics. On September 18th, the long-awaited launch of their ballet company, Douglas was busy at the studio supervising the dancers' arrival. Meanwhile, Ashley made the 600-mile journey to Florida. She quietly packed her belongings, left a letter on the table, and departed without a word. In the note, she described Douglas as possessive and controlling. Alluding to the gun incident, she expressed fear for her own life and that of their unborn child. She warned him not to contact her, threatening to involve the police if he tried. After reading her letter, Douglas was filled with regret and began texting Ashley, promising to change. For weeks, he sent apologies, declarations of love, and assurances of a different future. Ashley's responses, however, remained practical, focusing only on company contracts and financial matters. Despite his continued promises, Ashley wasn't open to reconciliation. She eventually contacted the police, informing them of Douglas' anger issues and recounting the incident with the firearm. As a result of the ongoing conflict, Child Protective Services visited Douglas' home and conducted an interview with his daughter, Eva. Following this, Douglas was required to undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation. However, the results showed no signs of mental health issues, nor was he considered a threat. Ultimately, he was cleared of the accusations. By this point, though, Douglas was grappling with financial issues, as his efforts to save the ballet company were in vain. The initial investment they believed was secure didn't exist. Despite his optimism, he hoped to secure enough funding to avoid exposing the truth. Under mounting pressure, he borrowed tens of thousands of dollars to cover the first payroll. Nonetheless, by late October, half of the dancers were dismissed, and Ashley publicly distanced herself from the organization on social media. Douglas asked her to take down the post to avoid affecting the remaining dancers, but she refused. Shortly afterward, he admitted the financial reality and had no choice but to close the company. Meanwhile, in Florida, Ashley's health was worsening, plagued by intense pain and fatigue. After numerous unsuccessful medical attempts to diagnose her condition, she sent a hair sample to a lab, which revealed dangerously high toxin levels, suggesting potential intentional exposure. She then recalled the tea Douglas prepared for her each morning and began suspecting that he might have been poisoning her, perhaps even contributing to his previous wife's sudden death. Soon after, Douglas, unaware of her suspicions, sent her a package of tea bags. Ashley, however, avoided drinking it, opting to take it to the police for analysis by a specialized team. Tests later showed no traces of toxic substances. 3 weeks before her due date, Ashley checked into a hospital without informing Douglas. From the beginning, she told medical staff that she believed her husband had poisoned her, exposing her unborn baby to heavy metals. She also accused him of domestic violence, claiming he had held her captive and harassed her in Florida. While her claims couldn't be substantiated, the hospital took precautions for her safety and assigned her a new name. After a cesarean section, her daughter was born healthy. Nevertheless, Ashley immediately sought hyperbaric oxygen treatments for the baby, enrolling her newborn in 26 sessions. In late July 2018, Ashley and Douglas came face to face for the first time in months at a courthouse in Florida. Douglas sought custody of his daughter, whom he hadn't yet met. Meanwhile, Ashley, alleging domestic violence and attempted poisoning, requested a restraining order against him. After a 2-day hearing, The judge denied Ashley's request and decided on shared custody of their daughter, citing insufficient evidence of poisoning or related illness. Following the court's decision, they were required to attend counseling sessions together for the sake of their child. During Easter weekend in 2019, while having dinner as a family, Ashley and her mother privately questioned Eva. Ashley's suspicions of Douglas hadn't faded, and she wondered aloud if he might have been involved in the death of his second wife. Eva tried to reassure them, insisting her father was a good man. The following year, Douglas noticed Ashley wearing what appeared to be an engagement ring. He secretly installed a tracking device in her car and hired a private investigator, confirming that she was seeing someone new. Ashley, on the other hand, filed a police report accusing Douglas of allegedly abusing their young daughter, prompting him to file for divorce. After an investigation, authorities found no evidence supporting the allegations. Frustrated, Douglas emailed the police claiming Ashley had a split personality. By then, their relationship seemed irreparable. Yet in mid-2020, despite divorce proceedings, Ashley surprised Douglas by reaching out, hinting at reconciliation. They began seeing each other again and, hopeful that things might work out, made plans to move in together. Douglas rented an apartment close to Ashley's mother's home, packed up his belongings, and arranged for a moving truck. On September 27, 2020, when Douglas arrived in Florida, Ashley's mother took their daughter for a walk while the couple settled into their new home. Suddenly, a heated argument erupted, loud enough for a neighbor to hear. Concerned, the neighbor immediately called 911. Moments later, Ashley, carrying a firearm, ran to a neighboring house, knocking on the door and asking for help. The armed neighbor also contacted emergency services. When paramedics arrived, followed closely by police officers, the entire team secured the area. The paramedics noted that Douglas was still breathing, though he had multiple injuries, including wounds to his leg and arm. A bullet had also penetrated his chest cavity, complicating his condition. Despite all efforts to save him, Douglas was pronounced dead at a local hospital an hour later. That night, Ashley claimed she acted in self-defense, offering few details to detectives. Meanwhile, her mother asserted that she and Ashley had endured domestic abuse from Douglas for over 3 years, adding that they had attempted to seek help on multiple occasions, but received no support. Ashley's lawyer told a detective that her client had been planning an escape to get away from Douglas once and for all. According to her, Ashley had arranged for a psychologist, 2 attorneys, a disposable phone, a safe location, and a rental car. She intended to execute the plan the next day, fearing Douglas might discover her intentions. Though Ashley wasn't initially arrested, investigators began to uncover inconsistencies in her self-defense claim. For instance, there were no weapons or blunt objects near Douglas, and Ashley showed no visible injuries or bruises. In November 2020, Ashley was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. After pleading not guilty and posting bail, she was released a week later. She was allowed visitation with her daughter, but primary custody was granted to her mother. Despite her legal troubles, Ashley continued to give interviews, defending her version of events. As the case garnered national attention, Ashley became widely compared to the protagonist of the 2010 film Black Swan, a psychological thriller set in the ballet world. After many legal twists and delays, Ashley's trial took place in the summer of 2024. According to the prosecution, Ashley had always intended to be a single mother and never planned to grant Douglas visitation rights. For them, her abuse claims were merely part of a strategy to achieve this goal. Ashley and her defense maintained their original story, and during her turn on the stand, she captivated the court and the nation following the trial by recounting with deep emotion her account of what happened on that tragic day. Her defense argued that authorities had failed to respond appropriately to her numerous complaints against Douglas and that she suffered from battered woman syndrome. Among Ashley's supporters in the courtroom were her mother and her 6-year-old daughter, who even spoke to a journalist, stating she was doing what was right for her mother. Despite this, after a late-night deliberation, the jury found Ashley Benfield guilty, not of the murder charge she faced, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter in the death of her husband, Douglas Benfield. The minimum penalty for this charge was 11 years in prison, with a maximum of 30 years. Afterward, Eva praised the verdict in a video posted on social media. Ashley's defense team quickly expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict, announcing their intention to file for a mistrial, citing alleged juror misconduct. Although Ashley's sentencing was initially set for October 22, 2024, the judge announced that he would consider the defense's motion claiming juror bias, possibly due to alleged dishonesty in a juror's responses and the potential use of a cell phone during deliberations. As of the final week of October 2024, our investigation found that the court was still deliberating on the defense's motion. Ashley's fate remained uncertain, as she could face up to 30 years in prison if the judge denies the motion and issues a sentence. The case of Adrienne Robert. Adrienne Robert was born on January 4, 1983 in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew her described Adrienne as a beautiful, kind person, always happy and vibrant. At the time of her disappearance, Adrienne was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and they were planning to start a life together. She was renting a house with her friend Jay. As their relationship progressed, Adrienne and Justin found a new house in July 2012, where they intended to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrienne decided to throw a goodbye party before moving out. Adrienne told Justin that she and Jay would be going out to a movie or a bar. Justin couldn't join them because he was busy with some other things. He didn't object to Adrienne spending the evening with Jay as they were close friends. Initially, Adrienne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about good times and having a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night out and went to the Diamond Doll strip club. Jay called 911 at 3:34 a.m. to report that he had found his roommate, Adrienne, unresponsive. He told the operator that they had been at a nightclub earlier, but Adrienne had left before him. When Jay arrived home, he discovered Adrienne on the bathroom floor, her eyes open, but not breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, suggesting a crime had taken place. The 911 operator instructed Jay to focus and perform CPR on Adrienne, guiding him through the process. Jay followed the instructions, attempting to revive Adrienne until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, by the time the ambulance arrived, Adrienne was deceased, and the medics were unable to help her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation aimed to answer two key questions. Who was responsible for Adrienne's death, and was her roommate involved? The police began by thoroughly searching the house, checking every closet and under every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not hiding inside. Detectives and forensic experts observed that there were no signs of forced entry on the front door when they first arrived at the crime scene. Adrienne's body was found on the bathroom floor wearing only a bra. A stab wound to the chest was the cause of death. The signs of a struggle in the bathroom suggested that Adrienne had tried to defend herself, leading detectives to suspect that the killer was a man. The detectives had to wait for the autopsy results to get more information. While searching Adrienne's bedroom, they noticed that someone had cut off a piece of her bed sheet. It seemed like the killer was trying to destroy evidence, possibly to eliminate any DNA they may have left behind. However, it was puzzling that the killer didn't take the entire sheet, as the remaining part could still contain DNA. Further investigation revealed a substance similar to seminal fluid on the sheet, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Additionally, Adrienne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that the killer may have stolen it. The police launched an investigation into the crime, searching for potential witnesses and issuing an alert for the victim's car. To piece together the events surrounding Adrienne's death, detectives needed to gather as much information as possible about her final hours. Before proceeding, however, they had to break the devastating news to her family. Adrienne's parents were stunned by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter. Justin discovered the shocking truth the morning after, when he saw police surrounding her house. He immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The detectives then broke the devastating news. Adrienne had been killed the previous night. Given that perpetrators often return to the crime scene and Justin's close relationship with Adrienne, the detectives felt compelled to investigate him as a potential suspect. In cases like this, it's standard procedure to investigate the people closest to the victim first. Later that day, police found Adrienne's car abandoned just a few blocks away from her house, with the headlights still on and the keys in ignition. This discovery further supported the investigators' initial theory that the killer had likely used Adrienne's car to escape the crime scene. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the interior of Adrienne's car for any clues that could help crack the case. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to identify the person who was driving the car. Although there were no cameras at the exact location where the police found the car, neighboring buildings had cameras that captured footage of the area. After examining the recordings, investigators spotted a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair. The man was seen walking away from Adrienne's car around the same time the 911 call was made. He was heading in the opposite direction, which made it essential for investigators to track his next move. Unfortunately, their attempt to follow him was thwarted when they discovered that he turned a corner where there was no surveillance camera. The investigators rewatched the footage multiple times, hoping to pick up on a detail they might have missed initially. The police had difficulty gathering clear information about the man in the recording because it was taken at night. However, interviewing witnesses provided new leads. A neighbor reported seeing Adrienne and a man running past his house on the sidewalk at night. This was unusual for two reasons. It was late, and they didn't appear to be going for a run. Adrienne was wearing a dress and holding her shoes while the man was not dressed in athletic attire. Although the situation seemed suspicious, Adrienne didn't appear to be in distress, as she wasn't screaming or calling for help. As a result, the neighbor didn't think much of the incident at the time. To reconstruct the events leading up to the 911 call, investigators spoke with Adrienne's roommate, Jay. Jay had gone to the club with Adrienne and claimed to have found her on the bathroom floor. During questioning, Jay told the detective that he and Adrienne had a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, a club they often visited to unwind and escape their daily problems. Jay told investigators that he and Adrienne walked to Diamond Dolls because they had been drinking and didn't want to drive. The police focused on the club because it attracted a questionable crowd. Jay claimed they arrived around 10:30 p.m. and stayed for several hours. While they were sitting at a table, a stranger with a beard and a baseball cap joined them. Later, Adrienne decided to leave, and Jay said he stayed behind. He noticed the stranger had also left. To verify Jay's story, investigators reviewed the club's surveillance footage. They found a camera with a wide angle that recorded everyone entering and leaving the club that evening. The footage showed Jay and Adrienne pervading at the club, appearing calm and normal. Another camera at the entrance provided a clear view of people's faces and clothing. CCTV footage confirmed Jay's account of events. It shows him leaving the club alone at 2:53 a.m. and walking towards his house. The footage also reveals that Adrienne left the club earlier at 1:38 a.m. Notably, she was seen wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket when she arrived at the club, but only wore the dress when leaving. This discrepancy raises a key point. Shortly after Adrienne departed, a man wearing a baseball cap rushed out of the club, presumably to return the jacket she had left behind. After returning the jacket, the man and Adrienne appeared to be engaged in conversation. The exact topic of their discussion remains unclear. Rather than returning to the club, the man followed Adrienne. After exiting the parking lot, they turned right onto a relatively isolated street with few houses. It is unclear whether Adrienne felt threatened or uneasy at this point, and this may remain uncertain. After reviewing the evidence, investigators determined that the man seen on camera at the club and the man near Adrienne's abandoned car were two different individuals. Based on the circumstances surrounding her death, they believe the man from the club's CCTV footage was the likely culprit. The other man may have been an innocent bystander. The police were exploring all possible scenarios to provide answers to Adrienne's parents as soon as possible. Adrienne's family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings. Investigators met with her parents, Mark, and Dolores, and assured them that they would do everything possible to find and bring the perpetrator to justice. According to her parents, Adrienne was a friendly person with no known enemies. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and her roommate, Jay. Investigators suspected that Adrienne did not know her killer. The laboratory report soon arrived, revealing that male DNA was found on the sheet, Adrienne's body, and the walls. Although the killer had attempted to destroy evidence by cutting out part of the sheet, forensic experts were still able to recover the DNA. However, when the investigators compared the DNA to the database, they were disappointed to find no matches. As a result, the police had the DNA of an unknown suspect in CCTV footage from the club where Adrienne spent her last evening. Detectives focused on the footage as the key to solving the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing both daytime and nighttime footage, which led to a breakthrough. Approximately 8 hours before Adrienne's death, investigators spotted the same man who had been talking to Adrienne in the parking lot and had left with her. This time, they got a clearer view of his face. To determine how the unknown man arrived at the club, investigators reviewed the footage and saw that he had taken a taxi. The taxi's phone number was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the taxi company. This new information made it simpler to identify the man. Detectives discovered that the phone number that ordered the taxi was caught on footage near Diamond Dolls, and it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, detectives confirmed that it was the same person. As a result, Thomas Frederick became the primary suspect in the case. The police required concrete evidence to arrest Frederick, but the surveillance footage alone was insufficient. To gather more evidence without alerting him, they began secretly monitoring his activities. Their goal was to obtain his DNA sample discreetly, as they were concerned that approaching him directly might scare him off. For a week and a half, the officers tracked Frederick's movements, following him to work and keeping a watchful eye on his home at night. Their patience eventually paid off when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers collected the butt and sent it to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The purpose of the test was to determine if Frederick's DNA matched the samples found at the residence of Adrienne Robert. While waiting for the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, as they suspected he might attempt to leave the state at any moment. After receiving the laboratory report, everyone's anticipation was met with an unsurprising conclusion. The DNA analysis revealed that the samples found on the sheet, walls, and Adrienne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. As a result, the police arrested and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed to be a frequent visitor to various clubs and bars, where he would often meet new people. When shown a picture of Adrienne, he stated that they had met at Diamond Dolls, where she had bought him a drink and they had danced and talked. However, when the police confronted him with CCTV footage that contradicted his alibi, he changed his story. Frederick then claimed that he and Adrienne had walked together to the end of the street before parting ways. When asked if he had ever visited Adrienne's house, Frederick responded that he couldn't remember due to his intoxication. This inconsistency cast doubt on his entire account, leaving it unclear what he was trying to conceal. The man initially claimed he had no recollection of being at Adrienne's house. However, it was revealed that a witness had seen Adrienne running barefoot while the man chased after her, which suggested that he was lying. When questioned by the investigators, Frederick provided an explanation. He claimed that Adrienne asked him to escort her home and that she began running suddenly after deciding she was in a hurry. She took off her shoes, prompting him to chase after her in order to stay by her side. Despite Frederick's shifting story, detectives uncovered compelling evidence. A DNA test showed that Frederick's DNA was on Adrienne's sheet and numerous items throughout her home. Frederick altered his story after receiving the DNA test results, now his claiming self-defense when confronted about his inconsistent explanations. Suddenly remembering past events he couldn't previously recall, Frederick finally shared an apparently factual narrative about how things actually occurred. They spent an intimate time in Adrienne's home where things ultimately became grim and both engaged. A confrontation between Adrienne and Thomas Frederick turned violent and resulted in a physical fight. During the altercation, Adrienne pulled out a knife and threatened Frederick, who then defended himself. Unfortunately, Adrienne was fatally injured in the process. After the incident, Frederick panicked and fled the scene instead of calling for emergency assistance. He feared being blamed for Adrienne's death. As a result, Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life and appeared in court in January 2014. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a different account of the events. According to the prosecution, Adrienne and her friend Jay had been drinking at home before heading to Diamond Dolls where they met Frederick. The three of them socialized and chatted casually. However, the next day, Adrienne decided to leave the club early to move into her new home with her partner, Justin. Frederick allegedly took advantage of the situation and followed her despite her attempts to evade him. He chased her to her home, broke in, and attacked her with a knife from the kitchen. The prosecutor stated that the injuries on Adrienne's body suggested that she was forced to have intercourse with Frederick. Fearing she would report him to the police, Frederick decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a portion of the sheet where his semen had stained, but this effort was unsuccessful. The police were still able to find his DNA on multiple surfaces, including Adrienne's body. Frederick then took Adrienne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. During the medical examiner's testimony, Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, left the courtroom unable to bear the details of their daughter's final moments. Mark Robert later explained, "I didn't want to hear that. It won't bring Adrienne back, and I didn't want to know what she endured." It was clear that Adrienne had put up a fierce struggle. Her parents have since struggled to cope with life without their daughter. The grieving family member acknowledged that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. "We're still reeling from the loss of our loved one and it will take time to recover," Dolores said. "However, we will eventually rebuild our lives as that's what Adrienne would have wanted. It won't be easy, but we will get through this." During the trial, the defense team attempted to tarnish Adrienne's reputation by claiming that she had invited Thomas Frederick to her home for consensual sex. However, this assertion is baseless and may have been a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence at the victim's house. The evidence, however, tells a different story. The presence of DNA points to one person, Thomas Frederick. The defense also claimed that Frederick acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. His claim of self-defense was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Although he was accused of killing Adrienne, there was no evidence to suggest he forced her into a sexual act by threatening her with a knife. Thomas Frederick, 25, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Adrienne's father expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that while it wouldn't bring his daughter back, justice had been served. He found it difficult to remain calm in the presence of the man who murdered his daughter, especially since Frederick showed no remorse or sympathy even after the verdict was read. Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, were overcome with emotion in the courtroom, but felt a sense of relief and happiness when the verdict was announced. They remembered their daughter, a always happy and lively person whose smile could light up a room, and expressed sadness that they would never see her again. Megan Jones, later known as Isabella Carolina Camelo Gomez, was born in 1974 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Public information about her early years and personal life is extremely limited, though it is known she was the only child of Irene Jones, a single mother who raised her. No details about her father's identity have surfaced, nor are there records of her schooling or employment history. Isabella lived with Irene into adulthood in a charming suburban home Irene had bought in Sydney. Irene Caroline Jones, born on November 2, 1945, was widely known as a devoted, generous woman and a caring mother. After retiring, she dedicated much of her time to volunteering for various charities. Friends and neighbors described her as sweet and hospitable, often offering her home to those in need. Irene was known to provide not only a loving home, but also financial support to Isabella. Even during brief periods when they lived apart, Irene always welcomed Isabella back. To the outside world, their relationship appeared close-knit and supportive. However, later accounts would reveal a different dynamic. Despite her public shyness and insecurity, Isabella was reportedly disrespectful and sometimes abusive toward her mother behind closed doors. Matters worsened in 1999 when Isabella met a woman named Paula Camello at their local Mormon church. Over time, Isabella and Paula became close friends, and Paula eventually introduced her husband, Carlos Camello Gomez, a Colombian native. This introduction would mark the beginning of a chain of events that deeply affected everyone involved. The couple started spending more time with Isabella, and Carlos eventually mentioned his brother Cesar, who was stuck in Colombia due to visa issues. In March 2001, Isabella traveled to Colombia to meet Cesar. Soon after, she claimed they had fallen in love and married him, news that shocked Irene. Despite her objections, Irene learned of the marriage through photos, to which Isabella reassured her it was merely a fake marriage. Following this, Isabella adopted the name Isabella Carolina Camello Gomez and grew increasingly close to Carlos. Their bond raised suspicions, particularly since Cesar was still unable to join her in Australia. Paula, growing jealous, suspected an affair between Isabella and her husband. It later emerged that Isabella was financially supporting Carlos, sending money to his family in Colombia. Carlos even had a separate room in Irene's house and a private phone to communicate with Isabella in secret. She reportedly bought him a car, yet he continued to pressure her for more, hinting he would leave Paula for her. Tensions between Irene and Isabella escalated as Irene opposed Isabella's financial support of Carlos. This led to intense conflicts, with Isabella allegedly becoming physically aggressive. A friend of Irene later recounted instances where Isabella's anger turned violent, breaking her mother's glasses and, on one occasion, reportedly pinning her down by the neck. Irene confided in this friend, admitting she was frightened but hesitant to involve the police, fearing potential fallout. She also felt threatened by Paula, who reportedly arrived at the house on multiple occasions, threatening to burn it down. In response, Irene installed security lights, though it offered little comfort. Witnesses described Carlos as aggressive and domineering toward Irene, physically intimidating her, and further isolating her within her own home. Irene saw him as a manipulative presence who was not only depleting her finances, but also eroding her sense of safety and control. Carlos's control reached unimaginable levels when he demanded that Irene mortgage her home, transfer its ownership to Isabella, or sell it to provide him with $20,000 to start a construction business. By May 2001, tensions had reached a breaking point. Carlos and Paula had separated, and shortly afterward, Carlos moved permanently into Irene's home. Irene felt pressured to vacate her main bedroom so he could share it with her daughter. Then, in October 2001, Carlos claimed he was returning to Colombia, but Irene later found out he was still around and confided in a friend about her concerns. She grew more anxious after learning that her mail was being redirected to an address in Maryland, where Carlos and Isabella had briefly stayed earlier that year. Irene was perplexed by the situation, especially as Isabella, despite receiving money to pay household bills, had not done so, using the funds to pay off her own debts instead. With mounting debts from the car she had bought for Carlos, Isabella even owed Irene a significant amount. As the financial strain intensified, Isabella renewed her push for Irene to sell the house. However, Irene refused, threatening to change her will, which had initially left her assets to Isabella in the event of her passing. Despite the friction, things appeared to settle somewhat between mother and daughter, and no one found it odd when they went out together on November 2, 2001, to celebrate Irene's 56th birthday. Although Irene was still apprehensive, she decided to make the most of this momentary peace, hoping to enjoy a calm evening with her daughter after nearly 2 years of constant tension. Their meal at the restaurant seemed pleasant, and after paying the bill around 7 p.m., the two women left to drive home. Isabella took the wheel, but upon arrival, she told Irene that the fuel tank was nearly empty and suggested that Irene go inside while she quickly stopped by the gas station. Irene entered the house alone while Isabella drove to refuel, returning around 8:15 p.m. citing abdominal cramps from her period and wanting a hot shower. After parking the car, Isabella went straight to the bathroom. Following nearly half an hour in the shower, she emerged, wrapped her hair in a towel, applied face cream, and prepared for bed. However, when Isabella opened the bathroom door, she was met with a terrifying sight. Standing in front of her was an intruder, a blond man in a beige long-sleeve shirt, his face covered with a pantyhose mask and wearing white gloves. According to Isabella, terror-stricken, she tried to flee through the bathroom's outdoor exit. However, the intruder reportedly yanked her back violently with a cord or cable around her neck. Isabella claimed she struggled fiercely, but the man struck her and pushed her onto the bed, attempting to undress her. She screamed for help, causing the man to flee. Shaken and terrified, she bolted to the nearest neighbor's house, frantically knocking and crying out for help, saying someone had broken into her home. The neighbors let her in, and Isabella urgently expressed concern for her mother. They advised her against going back, fearing it was unsafe. Isabella then borrowed the neighbor's phone and dialed Australia's emergency number, 000, anxiously informing the operator that an intruder had attacked her and that her mother was still inside. Police and ambulance units arrived shortly after. While paramedics attended to Isabella, officers searched the home, where they made a horrifying discovery. Irene's lifeless body was found face down on the floor, showing signs of strangulation and cuts on her neck. Officers immediately cordoned off the crime scene, calling in homicide detectives and forensic experts. The home appeared disturbed with items scattered, initially suggesting a burglary gone wrong. However, valuable items were left untouched and there were no signs of forced entry or missing belongings. Isabella was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for her injuries and to recover from the traumatic incident. During the ambulance ride, a friend of Irene's accompanied her. Isabella repeatedly asked about her mother, insistent on seeing her. Irene's body was transported to the morgue, where a post-mortem examination revealed that she had died from a combination of asphyxiation and sharp force injuries. It was determined that she had been rendered unconscious by strangulation before being attacked with a sharp object on the left side of her neck. The cuts were not immediately fatal, leading the assailant to use 2 ligatures around her neck, leaving a distinctive double mark on her skin. In total, she sustained 22 injuries, with the time of death estimated around 9:30 p.m., with a possible margin of error of 3 hours. The ligatures and sharp object used in the assault were never found. After leaving the hospital, Isabella stayed with one of Irene's cousins and her husband. The couple, deeply fond of Irene, described her as a kind soul, incapable of harming anyone, and were devastated by the brutal nature of her death. The investigation into Irene's death continued, but interviews with neighbors, friends, and family yielded no leads to help authorities identify or arrest a suspect. Frustrated, investigators sought to re-interview Isabella, but Irene's cousin and her husband reported that Isabella was constantly distressed and often cried when remembering her mother. Some sources even claimed they had to call an ambulance after Isabella overdosed on sleeping pills prescribed to help her rest. When the police finally spoke with her, they asked if Irene had any enemies or if anyone might wish to harm her. Isabella mentioned only a minor traffic incident she was involved in, but the other driver was quickly ruled out. By this point, investigators began doubting Isabella's account. Although both Isabella and Carlos were seen as suspects, there was no concrete evidence tying them to Irene's murder. At Irene's funeral on November 9th, some attendees allegedly heard Isabella mutter incriminating words, though this information would surface only years later, as witnesses initially believed she was rambling in grief. After the murder, Carlos and 2 of his friends were questioned. One of them, named Sean, stated he was at home, arriving around 5 p.m. and then falling asleep until 8:30 p.m. when Carlos and another friend, Nicholas, joined him. He explained that Carlos sometimes stayed over, sleeping on his couch. Around 1 a.m., Sean woke briefly to find his friends on the sofa. By 3 a.m., the police arrived to interview him, to which he claimed no knowledge of Carlos's connections with Irene or Isabella. Carlos and Nicholas provided statements placing themselves together in various locations until midnight, giving Carlos an alibi near the time of Irene's death. Carlos admitted meeting Irene and Isabella through his ex-wife Paula, claiming they had helped him post-separation. He noted that he once held a key to the Jones house but had since lost it. The investigation seemed to stall until a year after Irene's death. Her daughter sold the house for $300,000. In November 2002, Isabella gave birth to her first child with Carlos. Initially, she denied he was the father, stating he was only a friend and brother-in-law. Later, she admitted the child resulted from a casual encounter, after which she realized her true feelings for Carlos, deciding to divorce Cesar to be with him. Disturbing details about Isabella's relationship with the Camelo family heightened police suspicions. However, without solid evidence, Isabella remained uncharged, and Cesar was never questioned despite his occasional stays in Australia. Over time, the case languished without arrests, or a clear answer regarding who was responsible for Irene's death. In January 2003, the case took a new turn when Isabella reported Carlos for assault. Police records reveal that she stated they had known each other for about 4 years and had been in an on and off relationship for the last 3. Years passed with no progress until November 2007, when a forensic inquest took to re-examine evidence with the potential to refer the case to prosecutors if warranted. Though Isabella attended, she offered no new information. However, one witness, Diane McLeod, who had accompanied Isabella in the ambulance, shared new details. Diane recalled that Isabella had initially told detectives she did not see her mother during the attack, but had mentioned seeing Irene in the house to her during the ambulance ride. Diane also reported that Irene had confided in her about her fears regarding Isabella's connection to the Camelo family, particularly Paula's threats. Carlos, in a follow-up interview, stated that he met Isabella at a cybercafe around 7:30 p.m. on November 2nd before heading to Sean's house between 8 and 8:30 p.m. He then claimed he returned to the cybercafe before heading back to Sean's and then to a club with Nicola where they stayed until midnight. He denied being near the Jones house that evening, though his statements contained minor inconsistencies. Ultimately, the investigation concluded with insufficient evidence to proceed to trial, leaving the true identity of Irene's killer undetermined. The lead investigator recommended offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and suggested the case be transferred to the Homicide and Cold Case Unit for further examination. Between March and September 2013, the deputy state coroner reviewed the case again, yet it remained amid 700 other unsolved cases, limiting resources and attention. No further developments occurred until March 2017, when the Ministry of Police approved the suggested reward. New witnesses came forward, and a forensics team re-examined evidence collected from the initial investigation. Among the items was a yellow blouse Isabella wore the night of the crime, preserved in a forensic lab since 2001. This item had not previously undergone forensic analysis, as the technology available today didn't exist at the time. According to records, the blouse was retrieved from storage by state forensic staff in March 2013, photographed, and then returned to the lab for analysis in April that year, remaining under police custody thereafter. The forensic analysis from July 2017 provided significant insights when microscopic tests and DNA sampling were conducted on the blouse Isabella wore on the night of Irene's death. The tests revealed small brown stains consistent with traces of bodily fluids on the front and back of the blouse, along with several strands of hair. The forensic report concluded that the blouse had been exposed to an area with blood splatter, indicating direct exposure rather than mere contact with the perpetrator or the victim's body. Experts suggested the splatter likely came directly from the victim, Irene. Further tests showed that traces of bodily fluids on the blouse matched Irene's DNA, while seminal fluid found on it matched the genetic profile of Carlos. Unfortunately, by this time, Carlos was unavailable for questioning due to a severe brain injury from a 2013 motorcycle accident, which left him with deep retrograde amnesia, erasing memories of events before the accident. Though investigators hit a dead end with Carlos, the forensic findings and additional witness statements provided grounds to implicate Isabella in a conspiracy to orchestrate her mother's death. Supporting evidence included statements from witnesses at Irene's funeral, where some recalled hearing Isabella whisper that she didn't mean for things to go so far. This admission prompted authorities to wiretap Isabella and Carlos' phone conversations and set up listening devices. Surveillance tapes captured sounds of intimate interactions between Carlos and Isabella at the residence, confirming a long-standing relationship. Combined with Isabella's 2003 assault report, in which she admitted to a 3-year relationship with Carlos, it became clear that her marriage to Caesar was merely a facade, supposedly arranged by Carlos to facilitate Caesar's immigration to Australia in exchange for affection and sexual encounters. Further corroborating evidence came from Irene's experiences living in fear with Isabella and Carlos, with Isabella willing to do anything to please him, blinded by obsessive infatuation. Hospital records from the night of the attack also noted Isabella's intense interest in seeing her mother post-autopsy, which was interpreted as a need to confirm Irene's death. Another damning testimony came from Paula, Carlos's ex-wife, who claimed that Isabella had once asked her if she knew anyone who could get rid of someone. Despite these incriminating pieces, it would take 2 more years for the case to see another breakthrough. In 2019, new testimony surfaced when Sean, a former acquaintance, disclosed that he had seen Carlos and Isabella together days after the crime. He also revealed that Carlos allegedly described how he had slit Irene's throat and promised Nicholas $10,000. Nicholas, meanwhile, said that on the night of the crime, Carlos had left to return a car to his boss's home around 8 p.m., returning between 11 and 11:30 p.m. Later, Carlos reportedly confessed the crime to Nicola after they went to a club around midnight. Due to his brain injury, however, Carlos might never face justice. On the morning of Tuesday, September 24, 2019, detectives arrested Isabella. A detective inspector present at the arrest informed the press that Isabella seemed stunned when officers arrived, and she was taken to the police station, where she awaited a murder charge. Police officials alleged that Isabella had planned her mother's murder and staged a break-in to cover up the crime, her primary motive being the financial gain from selling Irene's home. Following the arrest, Isabella was granted conditional bail but was held in custody pending her arraignment. Her defense argued that she had cooperated with authorities, provided DNA samples when requested, and handed over her passport in 2001 to comply with a travel hold. However, the prosecution denied bail, asserting that despite the circumstantial nature, the case was strong. The prosecution highlighted that the murder was financially motivated, with traces of Irene's blood found on Isabella's blouse from that night. Although the judge deemed the case reasonably strong, he felt it was not overwhelming, ruling that any flight risk from Isabella could be mitigated with strict bail conditions, including a $10,000 bond, twice daily check-ins at the police station, passport surrender, and no contact with witnesses. After remaining in police custody, Isabella's detention hearing proceeded in the New South Wales Supreme Court 3 days later. Nearly 3 years afterward, in May 2022, Isabella, formerly Megan Jones, age 48, was rearrested, and a New South Wales Supreme Court jury found her guilty of murdering Irene Jones on November 2, 2001. Upon hearing the verdict, Isabella expressed disbelief and claimed the jury had made a mistake. Finally, on November 16, 2022, Isabella was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a minimum of 14 years before eligibility for parole. In delivering the sentence, the judge recounted that Irene had been ambushed in her kitchen while drinking a glass of water and had died from the combined effects of strangulation and stab wounds to her neck. The judge remarked that in her final moments, Irene must have felt confused, terrified, and betrayed, emphasizing that her own daughter had orchestrated and likely carried out her murder, driven by obsessive infatuation and greed. Though the defense argued that Isabella's direct involvement in the fatal attack could not be definitively proven, the court acknowledged her role in a criminal conspiracy with Carlos, who, due to his condition, would likely evade justice. Isabel would be eligible for parole in 2036, at which point she would be 62 years old, with her full term expiring in 2042. The case of Neha Varma. There are many instances that raise concerns about the safety of women, even in the present day. In June 2011, a similar event occurred in the lovely city of India. 3 women were discovered murdered in their residence, and it took the authorities several days to pinpoint the perpetrators. The query persists: who was responsible for this triple homicide, and what drove them to kill these three women? Let's delve deeper into the Deshpande family murders case. In 2011, Megha Deshpande, 42 years old, resided in the upscale area of Srinagar in the city of Indore with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlasha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini. It is noteworthy that Indore has repeatedly been ranked as the cleanest city in India. Srinagar is known for its affluent residents, indicating the Deshpande family's strong financial status. Megha Deshpande worked in a multi-level marketing MLM company for a considerable period. MLM, also known as network marketing, direct selling, operates by connecting individuals to the company through a network. This system allows for continuous profit generation for the company owner as more people join the network. Before residing in Indore, Megha lived in the city of Ujjain with her husband and the rest of the family, which is about 35 miles away from Indore. However, a few months ago, Megha shifted her home with her daughter and mother. Megha's husband, Nanjay, was a bank manager, so he had to stay in New Jain. Nanjay was a bank manager, and Megha was a senior employee at an MLM company, so they had no financial worries. Megha's family also had a strong relationship with their neighbors, and all the residents in this community were sensible. So far, there had been no crimes that could cause fear among the people. But something happened in this area on June 13, 2011, which shook the entire city of Indore. During that time, nobody had left Megha's house until noon, and no one's voice was heard. However, suddenly, one of Megha Deshpande's neighbors walked by her house and noticed something very unusual. There were footprints with blood stains around Megha's house. This sight alarmed her, prompting her to quickly call the authorities to investigate Megha's house. After that, the neighbor also knocked on the door of the house several times, but there was no response from inside. Then, they tried to look up inside the house through a window, but upon seeing what was inside, he screamed loudly because he saw three women lying on the ground in the house, with blood all around their bodies. After this, in a state of panic, the neighbor quickly informed the police about it. For the police, this case was completely different because such an incident had never happened in the Srinagar area. Now gradually, many people of the society came to know about this incident. And by the time the police reached the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside the Deshpande family's house. Then, the police entered the house and were surprised to see the bodies of three women, who had been brutally murdered by the criminals. They seized the crime scene and began their investigation, discovering 2 bullet shells inside the house. A police officer observed that Megha had been fatally shot in the head, but they could not locate the second bullet despite thoroughly searching every corner of the house. After this, the police called in the forensic team to start collecting evidence from the crime scene. And then the dead bodies of these 3 women were sent for post-mortem. By this time, not only Srinagar, but the entire city of Indore was shocked with this news. A few hours later, the post-mortem report is presented to the police, revealing that the murders of 21-year-old Aslaha and her 70-year-old grandmother Rohini were due to excessive bleeding with multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report also makes it clear that only Megha Deshpande was shot to death. But now, the biggest question before the police was if they have found 2 bullet shells. Then on whom was the second shot fired? On the other hand, Megha's husband and the general public started demanding a quick solution to the case, so the culprits could be punished. The police felt the increasing pressure from the public and a sense of urgency to solve the case quickly. Consequently, several teams were deployed by the police to investigate. One team examined the core detail records of the victims, while another team rechecked the forensic evidence. At first, the police found out that at the crime scene, there was blood of an additional person besides Megha, Ashlasha, and Rohini, and the police knew it was likely a man. A case of robbery and murder was filed, as it appeared that theft had taken place at the Deshpande family's residence. Later, investigations revealed that there were multiple calls made to Megha's phone from a specific number, and Megha had lengthy conversations with this number. Now the police extracted complete information about this number, from where it was revealed to the police that this number belonged to a girl named Neha Varma. Now the police had also started tracking the location of the girl, so that they could talk to her regarding this case, which might provide them with some leads. On the other hand, the police now also had a sample of that blood which was separate from Megha, Ashlasha, and Rohini at the crime scene. Then one day, suddenly the police find out that Neha is near an ATM in that area. After that, a team of police reached there and brought Neha to the police station to talk to her. Now Neha was told about the entire scene, which left Neha completely astonished. After that, Neha explained how she met Megha. Megha and Neha met for the first time in a shopping mall. Neha accidentally bumped into Megha while rushing through the mall. Megha was holding some items in her hand, which fell down due to the collision. Neha then apologized and helped Megha pick up the fallen items. During this time, there was a lot of conversation between them, so much so that Neha herself went to drop Megha to the car, and from here onwards, their friendship started. Neha discovered that Megha works at a company involved in multi-level marketing, MLM. They exchanged phone numbers the same day and started talking occasionally. Neha was curious about the MLM business model, so she would discuss it with Megha. However, the police became suspicious of Neha's story, because her words and body language didn't align. As a result, they questioned Neha extensively. Neha tried to conceal her lie briefly, but she couldn't withstand the police interrogation for long. Eventually, she confessed a story that shocked even the police. Neha, a 23-year-old, was beautiful and cheerful. Although she was a beautician, her financial situation wasn't good enough for her to fulfill her dreams. Neha's father was an ordinary van driver, which meant their financial condition wasn't great enough for Neha to pursue her dreams. It was during this time that Neha met a guy named Rahul Chowdhury. They developed a good friendship, which eventually turned into love. Rahul, at 24, was handsome, but his financial situation was the same as Neha's. Despite this, they loved each other deeply and wanted to marry, so they were searching for a way to become rich overnight and live their lives comfortably. One day, Neha met Megha. Megha had a fondness for wearing expensive jewelry, so whenever she went out, she adorned herself with her jewels. The day Megha met Neha for the first time, she was decked out in gold jewelry, which indicated to Neha that Megha was very wealthy, sparking the idea in Neha's mind to get close to Megha Deshpande and befriend her. Subsequently, Neha deliberately bumped into Megha to strike up a conversation, and thus their interactions began. Now, gradually, due to talking through a call, the thought of robbing Megha came into Neha's mind. After this, Neha included her boyfriend Rahul in her plan. She told Rahul that she has conversations with a woman who is very wealthy, and the added advantage is that there are no men in her house, so it will be easy to rob her. Hearing this idea, Rahul also becomes happy because by doing this, both of their financial situations would improve, and then they could live comfortably after getting married. From that day on, Rahul began to plan the murders of these three women. He believed that if he successfully killed them without anyone finding out, there would be no one to report them. With a complete plan in place, Rahul only needed a gun to carry out the deed. His friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, provided him with one as he also had a gun. With the means to execute his plan, Rahul started searching for the right day to make his move against Megha and her family. On June 13, 2011, Neha contacted Megha to join her MLM scheme. Megha was pleased to have Neha on board. Unbeknownst to Megha, this day would bring unforeseen tragedy. Neha arrived at Megha's house early the next morning. Megha asked Neha to fill out a form for the company, but Neha was unsure about the required information. She requested help from her friend and Megha approved. Neha then contacted her boyfriend Rahul. Now, according to the plan, Rahul and Manoj were waiting for Neha's call, and then shortly after that, Rahul and Manoj went to Megha's house. But as soon as Rahul entered the house, he showed Megha a gun, and then a few seconds later he shot Megha, causing her to die on the spot. The sound of the gunshot didn't go out of their house, because Rahul had shot very close. But the sound of this gunshot reached Ashlasha and Rohini's ears, causing both of them to run into the lobby. After that, first Rahul and Manoj frightened Ashlasha and Rohini, and asked for her ATM card and PIN to save their lives. In order to save her life, Ashlasha quickly gave her ATM card and handed it to Rahul. She felt that now these people would leave. But now, because Ashlesha and her grandmother had seen Neha, Rahul, and Manoj's faces, so now these three were afraid that after they leave, these two might inform the police. So Rahul first tried to shoot Ashlesha, but in haste, this bullet hit Rahul's own foot. Afterwards, Manoj brutally murdered Ashlesha and elderly Rohini with a knife. Afterwards, these three criminals stole 1,000 Indian rupees, valuable jewelry worth up to 500,000 Indian rupees, and Ash's ATM card before leaving the house. Surprisingly, it was the same ATM card Neha was planning to withdraw money from, but she was later caught by the police. Rahul was captured after going to a police station with a fake first information report, and then being hospitalized locally due to a gunshot wound in his foot. Nonetheless, when the police compared Rahul's blood sample taken from the crime scene with his own, it was a match. The police quickly solved this case and captured the criminals, resulting in much praise for their city's police force. Subsequently, this case remained in court for a long time, but eventually, in December 2013, the district court sentenced these three criminals to death by hanging. These killers had wiped out the entire Deshpande family line by murdering women from 3 different generations. Moreover, the police found bloodied clothes, knives, and jewelry in possession of these criminals. Neha Varma is currently incarcerated in the central jail, where she is teaching a beauty parlor course to other female inmates. It should also be noted that this was the first time the district court had pronounced capital punishment for a woman. Megha's husband, Nene Deshpande, expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and said he had full confidence in the judiciary and the police did a great job. The aspiration to become rich overnight turned an ordinary girl and boy into criminals. If these criminals had fled to another country after killing and stealing money, they might never have been caught. However, if Megha hadn't worn her valuable jewelry to the mall that day and hadn't trusted a random person, perhaps her family would still be alive today. One lesson to be learned from this is that we shouldn't develop such strong friendships with any stranger. In just a few days that we start inviting them home. Morgan Marie Wixon, later known as Morgan Mangle, was born on September 25, 1975 in Pennsylvania, USA. Details about her early years and personal life are scarce. From what little information is available, it's known that Morgan's relationship with her family faced challenges, especially as she grew into adolescence, adopting a rebellious attitude that her parents disapproved of. Still, the Wixons hoped she would eventually find direction and stability in life. In 1997, fate led Morgan to cross paths with a young man, Kevin Mangle Jr., who was just a year younger than her. Their connection was immediate, and they soon became a couple. Kevin was born on July 2, 1976, in Springfield, Pennsylvania, the oldest of 3 children of Kevin Mangle Sr. and Kathleen. Known affectionately as Kevin Sr., his father was a respected local businessman, and Kevin grew up in a close-knit family with his siblings, Christopher and Michelle. However, by the time Kevin finished high school in 1995, his parents had amicably divorced, each moving on to new relationships. Kevin Sr. settled in Downingtown with his second wife, and Kathleen remarried Dr. Richard Barton, adopting his last name and settled in Westchester. The family separation had a deep impact on Kevin as he valued family above all else. Though he experienced periods of distance from his father, those who knew him described Kevin as ambitious, hardworking, and determined. When he met Morgan, he believed he had found the ideal partner to build the family he'd always dreamed of. Friends recalled that Morgan was initially affectionate and seemed to compliment him well. However, as time passed, Morgan's behavior began to raise concerns, revealing a pattern of deception. One early red flag surfaced when, about a year into their relationship, Morgan attended a family dinner at the Mangles' home with an unexpectedly noticeable belly. When someone asked if she was pregnant, Morgan denied it, claiming she was simply bloated. Yet, just one day later, she gave birth to a baby girl named Mercedes. Even in the hospital, Morgan insisted she hadn't known she was pregnant, despite her family's doubts. Her demeanor lacked the usual excitement of a new mother, which surprised the Mangles, although Kevin was thrilled at becoming a father. Overjoyed, He and Morgan decided to marry soon after their daughter's birth. Following their wedding, Kevin established a landscaping business with Morgan helping him run it. Their family expanded with 2 more children, Kevin Jr. and Billy, and Kevin devoted himself to his family, even naming the business with the initials of his children. Although they appeared to be a happy, perfect family, tensions began to surface. Reports suggested that Morgan had been involved with some of Kevin's friends and that he was aware of her infidelities. Heartbroken but unwilling to break up his family, Kevin remained steadfast, hoping to provide a stable home for his children, despite the toll it took on him. In 2009, Morgan left their home on several occasions, staying with her mother but always returning. Even as friends described an increasingly turbulent relationship. Kevin's devotion to family extended to reconciling with his father that year, and they grew closer than ever. Even as his marriage became strained, he remained hopeful, valuing unity and stability for his children. By spring 2010, things seemed to be in relative order. That year, a 21-year-old named Stephen Chappelle, known as Steve, joined Kevin's landscaping business. Kevin quickly trusted and valued Steve as a team member, unaware that his presence would alter Kevin's life forever. On June 20th, Father's Day, the Mingles had planned a family picnic where Kevin was looking forward to reuniting with his father after many years. Yet, as time passed and Kevin didn't appear, his family grew anxious. Kathleen received a message from Morgan, explaining they wouldn't be attending due to unforeseen circumstances. This puzzled everyone, knowing how much Kevin had anticipated this reunion. Familiar with the couple's dynamics, his family couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, given Morgan's history of infidelity, financial deceptions, and even arrests for petty theft and bad checks. As worry grew, family members began calling and messaging Kevin, but he didn't respond. Upon piecing together their recent interactions, they realized that no one had seen or heard from him for several days. For Kevin's family, his silence was uncharacteristic and concerning. Close as he was with his mother, he would never go so long without contacting her, leaving them certain that something was very wrong. Concerned family members grew increasingly anxious as Kevin remained unreachable, prompting Kathleen to contact the police and officially report his disappearance. The following Monday, officers visited Kevin and Morgan's apartment where they encountered Morgan, who seemed calm and unconcerned. She explained to the officers that Kevin had messaged her to say he was fine but needed a break, instructing her to take over the landscaping business temporarily. According to Morgan, Kevin had felt overwhelmed by business pressures and decided to step away for a bit. She showed the officers text messages sent from Kevin's phone, supporting her claim, leading them to conclude that Kevin was merely taking a personal break. Consequently, they decided not to pursue an investigation at that time. However, Kevin's family found this hard to believe. They couldn't imagine him abandoning his children without warning. Determined to reach him, they continued calling and texting. But each time they attempted a call, they received only brief text replies telling them to leave him alone and let Morgan handle the business. The lack of phone conversations, along with the unusually short messages filled with abbreviations, uncharacteristic of Kevin's usual writing style, only heightened their worry. Suspicious, the Mengels alerted the police again, who then initiated a missing persons investigation. Detectives soon discovered that Kevin had allegedly left home on June 15th following an argument with Morgan. Just a week after Kevin's disappearance, the family learned Morgan was seeing another man, Steve Chappelle, a young man 13 years her junior who had recently started working in Kevin's landscaping business. When questioned, Morgan explained that Kevin had been fond of Steve, viewing him almost as a brother, and had asked him to help take care of the children in his absence. She even introduced Steve to her children as Uncle Steve. But suspicions only grew, especially as people saw Morgan and Steve acting affectionately in public, holding hands and lounging together at the apartment pool. Additionally, Steve was frequently seen driving Morgan's truck while out with the children, leaving Kevin's friends and family stunned. Police then brought Steve in for questioning. Under pressure, Steve admitted to having an affair with Morgan, stating she had initiated the relationship by showering him with compliments until he fell in love with her. Steve described intimate encounters in Morgan's truck and at the company workshop, but denied that Kevin knew of their affair. During the interview, detectives warned Steve that if anything had happened to Kevin, suspicion would naturally fall on him. Overcome, Steve broke down in tears and refused to answer further questions. Days later, as the investigation progressed, Kathleen received an unexpected request from Morgan to watch the children for a few days, arousing suspicions that Morgan might be planning to flee. On June 24th, Kevin's brother Chris and some friends decided to keep watch outside Morgan's apartment. Early that morning, they saw Steve leaving the apartment with a bag, followed shortly by Morgan, who loaded more bags into a truck before driving off. Notably, the children were not with them. Chris immediately alerted the detectives and began following them. The pair drove to the landscaping business, where one of the detectives was coincidentally present, hoping to uncover any clue to Kevin's whereabouts. When Morgan exited the vehicle, the truck's back was filled with clothing. She walked past the detective in a hurry, but when he tried to speak to her, Steve suddenly sped away in the truck. Confronted, Morgan claimed that Steve might have harmed Kevin, leading the police to take her to the station for further questioning. During the interrogation, Morgan admitted that Steve had expressed his love for her and his willingness to do anything to be with her. When detectives asked if she thought Steve had hurt Kevin, she quickly revealed that Steve had struck Kevin in the back of the head with a shovel. Morgan was then left in the interrogation room while police used phone tracking to try to locate Steve. Though they didn't find him immediately, they uncovered something far more incriminating: an extensive exchange of messages between Steve and Morgan. Realizing these texts might hold clues to Kevin's disappearance, a dedicated team spent hours analyzing the conversations. That same afternoon, they discovered the extent of the chilling plan Morgan and her lover had devised to eliminate Kevin and gain control of the business and children. In one exchange, Morgan had explicitly told Steve that once Kevin was gone, they could take over the company and build a life together as a family. The investigation revealed a premeditated scheme involving poisonous nicotine. Messages showed that on the evening of June 16, 2010, Steve had been in his mother's kitchen concocting a potent nicotine solution, lethal with just a few drops, after researching its preparation online. Once the poison was ready, Steve added it to Kevin's favorite tea and handed it to Morgan. The next morning, she placed the bottle in Kevin's truck, hoping he would drink it throughout the day. Sure enough, while working, Kevin took a sip to quench his thirst, unaware that Steve was watching him closely. When the tea didn't seem to take effect immediately and Kevin continued working as usual, the two resorted to their backup plan. Steve texted Morgan, indicating he was ready to act with a shovel in hand, waiting for Kevin to bend down. Around 10:20 a.m., while Kevin was trimming hedges, Steve seized the moment, striking him hard on the head with the shovel. The blow was so forceful that the shovel broke, prompting Steve to grab another and continue the assault until Kevin stopped breathing. Steve messaged Morgan, confirming, "It's done," to which she insisted on seeing for herself. Morgan arrived at the workshop, reportedly stepping over her husband's lifeless body, showing no remorse for the man she'd been married to for 13 years. She kissed Steve and took control of the situation, giving him instructions to dispose of the evidence and the body. Together, they wrapped Kevin in a tarp, bound it with rope, and hid his body in an unused garage at the landscaping company. After cleaning up, they left the scene. According to court records, they appeared to take satisfaction in their actions, with Morgan even joking about endorsing the brand of tea they used in their failed poison attempt. For days later, Steve transported Kevin's body to a wooded area behind his former high school, where he buried him in a shallow grave he had dug in advance. Meanwhile, Morgan began using Kevin's phone, sending texts to his family, friends, and even herself, attempting to create the illusion that he was still alive and simply taking time away. However, she failed to consider that technology could reveal both phones' locations as the same, a clue that would soon unravel their plan. While still at the police station, Morgan was confronted with the incriminating messages, and she was promptly placed under arrest. By tracking their cell phone locations, authorities found Kevin's burial site shortly afterward. 2 days later, Steve, who had fled to Colorado in Morgan's truck, was apprehended. Although he initially resisted extradition, He eventually agreed to return to Pennsylvania, where he tearfully confessed to everything. On July 18th, a memorial service was held for Kevin, with his family asking for donations to a trust fund for his children instead of flowers. The children were left in the care of Kathleen and her husband with support from extended family, as they faced the challenge of helping them cope with the tragic loss of their father and the absence of their mother. As the family mourned, they found solace in knowing the perpetrators of Kevin's murder were behind bars and facing justice. During the trial, shocking evidence emerged that revealed Morgan's depravity. From prison, she had sent Steve letters claiming she was pregnant with twins and that he was the father, hoping to manipulate him into taking sole responsibility for the murder. She even sent fake birth certificates describing the twins in detail, but investigators quickly exposed her lies. Ultimately, Steve cooperated with authorities, becoming the prosecution's key witness at Morgan's trial. He recounted how their affair began, how Morgan persuaded him to participate in the plan to kill Kevin with nicotine poison, and when that failed, to attack Kevin with a shovel. Steve described burying Kevin's body behind his high school, and the extensive communication between him and Morgan before, during, and after the murder. Morgan continued to attempt deception, even posting messages on social media to imply Kevin was simply taking time off. However, Steve revealed that she had tried manipulating him from prison by pretending to have given birth to twins, hoping he would take the fall. On February 3, 2012, a twist arose when a judge declared a mistrial due to the testimony of a police sergeant who mentioned an interaction with Morgan's father, implying she was capable of heinous actions. This comment was deemed prejudicial, leading to a new trial. Despite the setback, the Mengele family remained hopeful that justice would prevail for Kevin. The second trial began on February 5, 2013. At her initial hearing, Morgan, now 37, pled guilty to first and third-degree murder, conspiracy, and possession of a deadly instrument. Sentenced to life without parole and an additional 20 years on probation, Morgan expressed remorse through a statement read by her attorney, acknowledging the void she had left in Kevin's family. On February 11th, Steve Chappelle, age 24, pled guilty to third-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, receiving a sentence of 40 to 80 years in Pennsylvania State Prison. In contrast to Morgan, Steve spoke directly, expressing deep regret for his actions and stating he would never forgive himself. The case of Dupont de Ligonnes. In early April 2011, the shutters of house number 55 on Boulevard Robert Schumann in Nantes, France remained closed for the first time in years. This was unusual because the house, which belonged to the Dupont de Ligonnes family, was typically filled with the sounds of the family's 4 teenage children and their 2 dogs. The family consisted of Xavier, his wife Agnes, and their children. The neighbors, who were accustomed to seeing the shutters open even when the family was on vacation, noticed the unusual silence and alerted the local police, fearing something might have happened to the family. During the initial police inspections, no signs of the Dupont de Ligonnes family were found. However, on the 5th inspection, a horrific discovery was made. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnes was born on March 9, 1961, in Versailles, a western suburb of Paris. He was the eldest son of French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Lion and his wife Genevieve Tertz. The family also had a daughter named Christine, born in 1966. When Bernard deserted his wife for a mistress, Xavier took on a leadership role in his family, caring for his mother and sister. Christine began to claim she received divine messages, which she transcribed during automatic writing sessions, similar to those of a surrealist poet. Her unusual beliefs gradually evolved into doomsday sermons, leading her to establish a cult called the Church of Philadelphia. This group attracted members of the aristocracy, whom Genevieve convinced were chosen to survive the impending apocalypse and participate in the world's rebirth. According to Genevieve, Christine was destined to give birth to the Savior, a child who would be the reincarnation of both Jesus and Satan and thus bring salvation. Although Xavier inherited his father's noble title, he showed little interest in French traditions, instead being captivated by luxury, high-performance cars, and eccentricities. He also greatly admired the United States, Genevieve financially supported Xavier's extravagant lifestyle through significant donations from cult members, who were sworn to secrecy about their activities. On the beautiful island of Breja in 1974, Xavier formed a strong and lasting bond with Emmanuel Teneur. The two boys developed a deep mutual understanding that continued throughout their lives. Although Emmanuel confessed his love for Xavier, which was rejected, their close friendship remained unaffected. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnes Hona, born on November 9, 1962, in Neuilly, near Paris. Agnes was deeply devoted to her religion and worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Castille Catholic School in Nantes, where she taught catechism. While little is known about her family, it is well documented that Xavier and Agnes developed a close relationship, which led to a brief but passionate romance before they eventually parted ways. In 1990, Agnes gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a casual relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier rekindled their romance and decided to tie the knot. Xavier adopted Arthur as his own son, and 2 years later they welcomed their first biological son, Thomas, who would carry on the family name. To mark the occasion, Xavier chose Emmanuel as Thomas's godfather. The couple went on to have 2 more children, Anne and Benoit. The family of 6 seemed to personify the ideal family unit, with Xavier appearing as a loving father and the children excelling academically, hinting at a bright future. Agnes was devoted to nurturing her children's faith, regularly taking them to Mass. Others perceived her as kind yet firm with her children. Around the year 2000, Xavier relocated his family to the United States, aligning with their individual interests and preferences. Xavier, a charismatic and multilingual individual with a discreet nature, was confident in his ability to blend in seamlessly in the United States. However, this endeavor ended in failure, resulting in substantial financial losses. Upon his return to France, he began to amass significant debts tied to his professional pursuits, which often seemed shrouded in ambiguity. Multiple investigations have portrayed him as a salesman. According to French media reports, financial struggles had been a persistent concern for Xavier over several years. One of Xavier's unsuccessful ventures was an unusual scheme to import cars from the United States to France. He also launched several small businesses, none of which saw significant success, including a hotel and restaurant guide for sales representatives, a customer loyalty system for restaurants, and an import scheme for cars from the United States to France. He was listed as the manager of the French Federation of Commerce, although the accounts for this enterprise were minimal. In 2003, he hired 6 salespeople to help turn his fortunes around. Xavier's work often took him away from home from Monday to Friday, earning him a meager annual income of around $4,200 in declared earnings. As financial issues began to strain his marriage, typical marital disagreements were likely exacerbated. In 2004, Agnes poured her heart out on a French forum, detailing the challenges she and her husband faced. She revealed that he had once told her that a group death as a family wouldn't be catastrophic, a haunting statement that would linger. By 2009, the mounting debt had severely impacted their relationship, leading to a temporary separation. During this period, Xavier sent numerous letters blaming Agnes for the family's troubles and holding her responsible for their financial ruin. This emotional turmoil took a devastating toll on Agnes, causing her to lose her appetite and struggle with insomnia on numerous occasions. Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who hailed from a wealthy family and had inherited a substantial fortune from his father. Despite his affluence, Emmanuel lived modestly in a small apartment, preferring to use his wealth to support others. He was an enigmatic and somewhat eccentric individual who never hesitated to lend Xavier significant sums of money. In addition to financial support, Emmanuel funded Xavier's travels and even co-signed for the house where Xavier eventually settled with his family in the late 2000s. Thanks to Emmanuel's generosity, the family resided in a cozy chalet located in the suburbs at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, west of N. As they settled in, the neighbors quickly formed the impression that Agnes was domineering and less pleasant than her husband. Behind closed doors, Agnes faced a personal crisis. She saw Xavier as both too fragile and paradoxically too rigid, almost militaristic in his behavior. While he played the role of head of the household, he was emotionally distant, lacking tenderness and affection, and sometimes even abusive. Agnes confided in her Thursday prayer group friends about her fears regarding Genev's control over Xavier. She painted her mother-in-law as a mentally unstable mystic, and her concerns ran deep. On January 20th, 2011, passed away, marking a significant turning point. Given the contrast between his lavish lifestyle and financial struggles, Xavier hoped his father's demise would yield a substantial inheritance. However, he was in for a rude awakening upon reviewing his father's estate, only to find a few papers, a rifle, a card, a ring, and some cash, which he promptly claimed. Within hours of Bernard's passing, Xavier used his father's card to withdraw cash. By February 2nd, he had obtained a firearms license, and by March 12th, he had purchased a silencer for the rifle. During this period, he also acquired quicklime and honed his shooting skills in his garden, targeting a balloon on a stand. When Emmanuel visited, he tried the rifle, unaware of any suspicious intent. Xavier downplayed the silencer, citing concerns about disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, the two friends Bernard and Xavier visited a shooting range, where Bernard's inherited rifle drew considerable attention. The following day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times, and they engaged in a nearly hour-long conversation. The investigation suggests that the horror unfolded on Sunday, April 3rd. That evening, Xavier, Agnes, and their children went to the movies, followed by a pleasant dinner at a restaurant. Everyone was present except for Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic university and resided in a nearby student hostel. After their night out, the family returned to their chalet, where neighbors caught a glimpse of them, and some family members exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. Xavier sent a message to Christine, detailing their dinner outing. The prevailing theory is that Xavier drugged his wife and children, waiting for them to fall asleep before shooting and burying them in the garden. He also killed the family's 2 Labrador dogs. Xavier's alibi was as dubious as his actions. On Monday morning, he began contacting people in his family's social circle from as early as 6 a.m. He phoned Agnes' workplace, claiming she was unwell, and contacted the children's schools, stating that Arthur, Agnes' son from a previous relationship, had been in a motorcycle accident and that Anne and Benoit were ill. By midday, he sent a letter to the restaurant where Arthur worked, announcing Arthur's resignation due to his father's alleged transfer to Australia. There was still Thomas to account for. On the same Monday, April 4th, Xavier met up with Thomas, having dinner with him at a restaurant near his university residence. After the meal, a tired Thomas returned to his room. Thomas received an urgent message from his father the following day, claiming Agnes was in a hospital after a bicycle accident and was in a mild coma. This prompted Thomas to travel immediately. However, it is presumed that Xavier had already killed Thomas, just like he did with his siblings and mother. Later that evening, Emmanuel had a 19-minute conversation with Xavier. At midnight, a friend of Thomas received a message from him, stating he was watching a movie with his father at home. But by then, Thomas was likely already dead. About an hour later, Xavier sent an email to Emmanuel, arranging to meet soon. Emmanuel replied, reminding Xavier that he had power of attorney and that the key was on the sailboat. Instead of trying to hide, Xavier went about his daily routine, going in and out of his house, leaving notes on the door and withdrawing cash from ATMs. He used his credit cards to pay for meals at restaurants and stayed in hotels under his real name, all while being caught on security cameras. As time passed, neighbors began to notice something was off. The usually open windows of the chalet were closed. The family's 4 children were no longer seen. The dogs had stopped barking and Agnes hadn't returned to work. It was as if the family had vanished into thin air. Piecing together the strange signs, worried neighbors alerted the authorities. When officers arrived, they found a nearly bare refrigerator containing only a few jars of preserves. In the kitchen, they discovered a still damp mop, and in the living room, a chest sat on the table and guitars lay on the sofa. It seemed as though the Dupont de Ligonnes family had vanished into thin air. The scene was unsettling, with beds stripped of their sheets, picture frames empty and closets devoid of clothes. Everything hinted at a sudden and mysterious departure. A few days later, on April 9th, a letter emerged, sent to family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been recruited by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had to go into hiding as part of a witness protection program, explaining their sudden disappearance and silence. However, neighbors were skeptical about this story, feeling that something wasn't quite right. They feared for the family's safety and urged the authorities to dig deeper. Xavier drove through southern France in his car as the case continued to attract media attention, leading to the emergence of more details from the past. On April 15th, security cameras recorded Xavier checking into a small hotel near Cannes, where he parked his car, grabbed a bag, and vanished into the nearby woods, marking the last time he was seen. Emmanuel made a surprising call to his mom, revealing secrets like his homosexuality, alcoholism, and depression. When cops searched the house again, they found a freshly disturbed patch of earth. After investigating, they discovered a concrete slab leading to a grim find. Agnes and her 4 kids shot and wrapped in bags with religious symbols, buried in burlap sacks with quicklime, along with the family dogs. In the master bedroom, a sleep apnea device was found, last recording at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Xavier may have spared Thomas due to his bond with Emmanuel. However, when questioned, Emmanuel's cooperative facade cracked, revealing inconsistencies in his story. 24 hours later, Nantes police searched Emmanuel's apartment, seizing his laptop. He then revealed his knowledge of Xavier's rifle. An examination of the hard drive uncovered emails between Emmanuel and Xavier, including one from April 6th that raised suspicions. Investigators began to suspect Emmanuel's involvement in Xavier's escape. Christine and JVV also faced scrutiny for their evasive answers about Xavier and the Church of Philadelphia. JVV dodged questions about Xavier's childhood and the sex income, denying its existence. But investigators found a complaint from former members who fled after Christine's proposal to conceive a chosen one through group sex. This revealed the sex workings, including rich backers. Suspecting support for Xavier, police questioned former members and watched the sex followers, but found no leads. Authorities tracked Xavier's movements via cell phone records, last sighting April 15th, possibly carrying a weapon. Despite searches, no body remains found. Speculation rescued by boat taken to another country. International arrest warrant issued May 4th. Police investigated boat ownership but found nothing. On May 9th, Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for another interview, which had escalated into a grueling interrogation. The police had shifted their focus to finding a sailboat and identifying its captain. But Emmanuel was still oblivious to the magnitude of the investigation or the mounting suspicions against him. When questioned about a sailboat reference, he attributed it to coincidence, explaining that he had granted Xavier power of attorney to access his safe deposit box in case of an emergency. The key, he revealed, was hidden on a model sailboat in an apartment, and the safe contained only his will. The police, still frustrated and empty-handed despite the intriguing coincidences, ultimately released Emmanuel. At this point, the investigation remained shrouded in uncertainty. Emmanuel was viewed as a witness with no arrests made, and police questioned the need to further interrogate him. However, they decided to apply pressure, given his credibility as an accomplice. A notable detail emerged when investigators found an unusual $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel linked to a previously unknown Monaco account. Authorities requested account statements, but faced resistance due to Monaco's strict banking privacy laws. September 28th, for police officers resetted Emmanuel's home. He emerged disoriented, in underwear, barely confirming his identity. His sparse apartment was cluttered with empty bottles, revealing deep loneliness. Emmanuel was tormented by the lack of letters or calls from his friend. The police now viewed him as a lost soul, not a suspect, wondering if they'd followed the wrong lead. Xavier had become one of France's most wanted alleged murderers, possibly even globally renowned. In 2015, A journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier, stating he was alive, but the handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses failed to yield any clues of evidence. On January 9, 2018, police raided a monastery in Rabbrun-sur-Aran following a tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier, but after an intense 2-hour search, they determined it was a case of mistaken identity. On January 18, 2019, Angel died of a heart attack. And that same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland. But once again, it proved to be a case of mistaken identity. Another theory proposes that Xavier might be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where his linguistic skills and charisma would enable him to seamlessly blend in. Years have passed, and the Church of Philadelphia has not only endured, but reportedly undergone a resurgence. This small, highly secretive group consists of members who have been part of it for nearly 40 years, living as if they have withdrawn from the world. In the summer of 2019, 2 brothers who were raised within the sect filed new complaints against Christine and GV, claiming that these women fervently preached that Xavier was alive, innocent, and hiding in the United States as part of a witness protection program. They alleged that everything written in the April 9th letter was pure fabrication. Since 2011, the case has been plagued by speculation and false leads, leading authorities down endless dead ends. The pressing question remains, will justice ever be served for Agnes and her children? Despite the bleak outlook, some still believe that the truth will eventually come to light. Jennifer Watkins lived in Colorado Springs in 1999. In October of that year, she was hired at the Memorial Hospital. A month later, on November 6th, Jennifer did not pick up her children from school. She also did not come home after her shift. This worried her husband, and he called the police. Her mom also did the same when she could not reach Jennifer. 2 days later, her body was discovered under a stairwell in an area of the hospital that was under construction. 2 workers found her because they noticed a distinctive smell. Her body was wrapped in plastic and bound with duct tape. The autopsy revealed that she passed away due to blunt force trauma to the head. She had also been assaulted. DNA of the attacker was found at the crime scene. It was stored to be used later. Jennifer's husband, Michael Watson, was interviewed several times and fully cooperated with any requests made by investigators. After an extensive investigation, no suspect was ever identified, and eventually the case went cold. Then, in 2017, detectives started to work with Parabon Nanolabs, a DNA company based in Virginia. They used DNA found at the crime scene to develop a composite of the suspect. It was believed that he was about 25 years old at the time of the crime and had blue or green eyes. In 2019, a DNA profile was developed for genetic research at Parabon. Then, in August 2020, investigators were notified of a potential lead of the unknown DNA profile. The person of interest was Ricky Sievert. He was 29 years old when Jennifer's life was taken. He also matched the composite pretty well. Sievert worked in the maintenance department of the Memorial Hospital since April of 1998. He was looked into in the initial investigation and interviewed by detectives. Sievert told them that he was working a swing shift on the day Jennifer's life was taken. Sievert denied having ever seen her before. Investigators found that he passed away on November 2, 2001, in a car accident on Highway 94, just east of Colorado Springs. The Colorado Bureau of Investigations conducted an analysis of familial DNA collected from surviving family members of Sievert. They determined that over 99.99% of the population could be excluded. Sievert could not be excluded. On October 1, 2020, the case was sent to the district attorney's office for review. In December, officials determined that Sievert was responsible for taking Jennifer's life. Colorado Springs Police Department Chief Vince Nisk said in a statement, 19-year-old Deborah Tomlinson lived in Grand Junction, Colorado in 1975. She was a college student. Deborah was outgoing, enjoyed being around people a lot, loved horses, and was a good student. Sadly, her life was taken in December 1975. Her body was found in her apartment in Belfort Avenue. The case was investigated by Grand Junction detectives who gathered extensive evidence. In April of 1976, they exhausted all their leads and the case went cold. In 2020, the case was looked into again. The Grand Junction Police Department partnered with Parabon Nanolabs. They analyzed DNA evidence left behind at the crime scene of the person that took Deborah's life. They processed the DNA and looked at 850,000 genetic markers that allowed them to build a family tree of the attacker. Ultimately, the process led them to Jimmy Dean Duncan. Investigators then asked Duncan's brother for DNA sample and he gave it to them. After some more testing, Detective Sean Crocker from the Grand Junction Police Department were able to say without a doubt Duncan is the person that took Deborah Tomlinson's life. At this point, you might wonder why did the investigators not go to Duncan himself for the DNA sample. The reason they could not is he passed away in 1987. This means that there unfortunately won't be justice. But the case being solved still provides some degree of closure for Deborah's family members. Deborah's dad, Jim Tomlinson, said in a response to the news, "It took a lot of weight off my mind. Still don't know why, but at least I know who." The Grand Junction Police Department has found no connection between Duncan and Deborah. Investigators did, however, find out that Duncan had a family member who lived close to the college Deborah attended. Detectives believe Duncan was visiting his relative, and this is how he possibly encountered Deborah. 59-year-old Wilda Wilkinson lived in Bangor, Michigan in 1986. She was a hardworking and loving person. One day, when she did not show up for work, her employer called her two daughters to hear if one of them knew where she was, but they did not. One of the daughters then found Wilda's lifeless body on the floor of her home. She had been strangled. It appeared to investigators who arrived on the scene that a break-in took place. Detectives collected DNA evidence from an unknown man at the crime scene in her home. Despite investigators' best efforts, the case went cold for many years. In 2010, the case was looked into again. This time, investigators were able to eliminate some people associated with the case and got useful statements from witnesses. In March 2019, investigators traveled to California to question a man by the name of Leon Curry. He had served about 27 years in prison for an assault in an unrelated case. Curry had been a person of interest for quite some time, because he lived in the same area as Wilda and committed a similar crime. When investigators talked to him this time, he confessed to taking her life. Since a lot of people make false confessions, investigators decided to use DNA testing to make sure what he said is true. His DNA did not match the DNA of the unknown offender though, and he was ruled out. Investigators were not done with the DNA they collected back in 1986, however. They entered it into a DNA database and found a match. Using the DNA technology, they identified 50-year-old Robert Waite as the person who took Wilda's life. When investigators went to talk to him, they found him serving time in a Florida prison for unrelated kidnapping and battery charges from 2007. In August of 2020, he confessed to the crime. In October, he was sentenced to 25 to 60 years. He was just 16 years old when he ended her life. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.